Everybody, and welcome to Unit 5. I wanted to start off by saying those of you who have been participating in the discussion forums, we had a really vibrant discussion about the relationship between biopolitics, security, and development, and especially considering this idea of resilience. But there was a few things that I wanted to bring up to make clear that I think were sort of lacking in our discussion, and that the topic this week allows us a chance to sort of revisit. Many of you didn't spend very much time talking about the biopolitical part of resilience. So, of course, resilience makes sense. It's the idea that societies develop sort of organic mechanisms that allow them to deal with instability and not fall victim to crises. But actually, in what the criticism offered by somebody like Chandler is actually a bit deeper than we got to, because his argument is that we have biopolitical assumptions about most of the places in the world that are unstable or violent that prevent resilience from being the frame we use to engage and think about that kind of thing. The idea here is that most of the security threats in our world we assume emanate from patterns of life that are inappropriate or under or sort of not acceptable, even if we have these assumptions implicitly. The idea is that civil wars and conflict that lead to terrorism and other forms of violence are a manifestation of an inappropriate sort of pattern of behavior, and that we take it upon ourselves to intervene in these places in order to right that behavior. Why that's important is because it actually, as the Calder argument has sort of pointed out, has proven not all that effective. Now, this week we're going to talk about the war on terror a little bit more specifically, and I want you to keep this discussion of biopolitics and resilience and security and sort of working through the nexus of the three of them in your mind as we do. Because many critical scholars, as you'll note, argue that the American sort of understanding of the war on terror is deeply biopolitical. And that when biopolitical expectations are related to threat, it justifies forms of behavior that are violent in themselves and may actually contribute to the violence they're sort of aimed at rather than address it. So as we go through this week, I want you to try to keep that in mind and address that. You're going to do that in one of two ways. One way is to think about this relationship and how it relates back to the idea of war. War is a very particular and totalizing, securitizing term, right? It immobilizes our society. It forgives particular kinds of behavior that we wouldn't find acceptable under any other circumstances. But we do that because we have a clear strategic goal, and we have a clear specific endpoint or ability to say we won something. Biopolitical informed conflicts like that against terrorism threaten to be very different in the sense that they don't have specific goals. They're far more nebulous, and they actually have a lot to do with sort of re-engineering the way people in other parts of the world live, which is, as we just sort of ascertained, a process that might not be all that successful. So in this sense, how do we think about war against something rather than perhaps maybe thinking about resilience of populations against terrorist groups or instability and violence and what that might be differently? The other thing that's due this week is the second reflection paper. And here, I don't want you to really focus in on the war on terror or biopolitics or anything like that. Instead, I want you to take a broad view of what you might think U.S. national security culture is like, the discourse. What I'm looking for you to think about here is like, what are the larger assumptions, rhetorical patterns, language devices, concepts that define how the United States thinks about its security, and then identify whether that helps or hinders our ability to actually produce that security. Again, critical security studies is focused on this idea that security threats are not just laying out there for us to find. We create them in language or in how we decide to interact with them. An example of that is that a threat that we see today, if we were to engage it through diplomacy or development, it's not a threat anymore. It's a different kind of problem. That could be good, it can be important, it could be essential, but it can also be really, really dangerous in the sense that because there's no inherent relationship between an issue that we're concerned about and how we think about it, we can end up thinking about it in ways that are counterproductive or even contribute to the very thing that we're worried about. And that's something Calder is going to pick up in the last few weeks of the course. So make sure you think about that. The other thing I wanted to throw your way is a quick tip. One of the things I'm looking for you to be able to do here is to engage directly with the theoretical material. So what that means is that I really want you to take the time to introduce, define, engage with, and utilize the theories from the class in a consistent way. And that's one of the things that's going to make sure you get as strong a grade as possible. Looking forward to reading your papers. Looking forward to seeing you on the discussion forums. Have a great week.